Here we have a 210-year-old document. This is not just any document, but rather the death nail in the coffin to one of history's greatest generals. His abdication, official second abdication, on the 22nd of June, 1815, at the Elysee Palace, printed the same day by the imperial press. Basically, the abdication was a contingent of both the Battle of Waterloo and the eventual siege of Paris that was about to transpire. Let me explain. So, Napoleon, after he abdicates the first time, they sent him to the island of St. Helena. But it's right off the coast of France, and believe it or not, he actually escapes, shockingly. And he arrives at the shores of France in February of that year. He arrives back in Paris around late March 22nd, March 23rd, 1814. And then what's known as the 100 Days begins. He then wants to try to seek vengeance, if you will. Long story short, they march on Belgium. They meet Wellington at the Battle of Waterloo. We all know how that goes, but for those of you who are unfamiliar with the Napoleonic War, he loses, and pretty badly. And so then the Allied forces are like, well, what do? We have this little corporal here who just doesn't seem to want to quit. So the Austrians are the main aggressors, obviously, because Austria was the first country he made quote-unquote peace with. So they march on Paris from all directions, not just the Prussians, but the Russians, the British, and Napoleon was like, well, I don't want my army to fall. I don't want France to fall into the wrong hands. Even if the Bourbons come back, it's better than having France fall into foreign hands. So he basically, in a last-ditch effort to save the country he loved and fought so hard for, abdicates for one final time and is sent to the island of Elba, where he lives out his days, guarded by British troops, and he dies in 1821, around the age of 60 or 70, I forgot. But basically, in the abdication speech, which this was not meant for public eyes, this was only meant for clerks, for courts, for men of the army, for his staff, for basically the government. This was not meant for everyday eyes. Unlike normal bulletin of laws, this one was kind of kept away, archived, and not kept secret, but it's widely known that this abdication is nowhere near as popular or as found on websites like the 1814 one, a year prior. This one is, and because it was actually printed the same day on the palace grounds by the imperial press, it makes it a little bit more interesting in my opinion. So basically the gist of the abdication was, I will have my son Napoleon II become Emperor of the French, even though Napoleon II was like 4. You can't have a 4-year-old running around becoming emperor. That wouldn't work. And basically he was trying to say, hey, fight till the bitter end. I want this resolved. I want a legacy. I want to have an heir. That's why Napoleon II, that's why he says here, my political life is terminated. I proclaim my son, Napoleon II, Emperor of the French. Basically trying to salvage any decency he had left, because the country was about to go into civil war and he didn't really want to be seen as a bad guy. He wasn't seen as a bad guy to the French, but after Waterloo, everything kind of started falling apart. So we have this little paper. As you can see, it's been through a little bit of wear and tear, mostly intact, pretty good for being 210 years old, and basically a broadsheet, if you will. You can basically cut this back off. I don't know. You can basically cut this back off and make it a broadsheet. That's basically what it is. Now, a broadsheet, for those of you that don't know, are basically a front and back. No, it's basically like this. This is, basically a broadsheet. If I were to cut this and just leave this, front, back. Basically, that's what a broadsheet is. There's no interior pages, there's nothing else. And broadsheets were mainly used at the time, and still are, for extras, extraordinary news, important news, stuff like that. So this is basically the death nail in the coffin to one of history's greatest generals and greatest leaders. And by greatest leaders, I'm not saying he was the best, but if I had to rank Napoleon between, I would rank him along the lines of, honestly, like Robert E. Lee, Grant, Washington during the Revolutionary War, Alexander the Great, and those are the people he kind of aspired to be. Alexander the Great, he wanted to be Washington. He wanted to be like Washington, lead his men, and he was loved. He was beloved by his men. They adored him. So this is kind of a neat little snippet, and the fact that it was only printed to government officials and not the public at large. You can see someone even wrote the year, which I don't know why, but it's kind of cool to still have this 210 years later.